Hi. It's June 3rd, 2020, and I'm making this video because several people have sent me private messages, or one person even found me on Facebook and said, "We miss you, how are you? We haven't seen you make a video for a while." And the main reason I haven't made a video is because I don't feel like anything I have to say, especially during these times right now, is really that important. I'm sitting in my living room right now looking out my front window, and my neighbor had two huge old trees fall within inches of his house. It looks like he experienced a little bit of gutter damage, but it didn't fall directly on the house. Lots of damage in my town. A huge windstorm came through. There's a 400-foot flag. It's called the Symbol of Freedom, a QT flagpole. And the winds just shredded the flag. It is shredded. And when I saw the picture of it this morning, I thought, isn't that an appropriate symbol of what we see going on around the world, especially in the United States? So it's June 3rd, unless you've been living on Mars. The world has been under lockdown and or various phases of lockdown for the last 3 months. 40 million people in my country are unemployed. So that's 25% of working Americans are unemployed. The restaurant industry is just shattered. That matters to me because I've worked in the restaurant industry for over half of my life, and it's just sad to see what is happening. Worst of all, last week we all witnessed a black man, George Floyd, be murdered while it was being videotaped, and we all just watched helplessly. Millions and millions and millions of people have taken to the streets to protest this, realizing that it is because of years of being silent in our homes while we, in our hearts, have love for people of all races, colors, ethnic backgrounds. Perhaps it's a cumulative guilt for not standing up when we see that person be discriminated against. Perhaps we see a person of color be pulled aside for questioning at the airport for security check when we weren't. There's many examples. My husband was sharing some of his own experiences with racial prejudice starting when he was a teenager. And as my husband put it, I think he put it best. He said, because I said, but we're all outraged. I'm outraged as a white woman when I see a black person experience injustice. And he said, yeah, but you cannot really understand because you've never experienced it. And I'm like, well, help me understand. And he said, well, just like I'll never be able to understand what giving birth feels like because I'm not a woman and I'll never give birth, you cannot understand what it feels like. And yeah, so there's just a lot going on in the world. A lot. Everybody's walking down the street or riding their bikes and just pausing to kind of, it's like, I don't know, everything seems to be crying out and groaning. in pain. Speaking out of crying out, not crying out, but speaking out, last night, one of my friends sent me or forwarded me one of Lloyd Evans, the JohnCedars channel, latest videos on why you are more moral. Let me look at the exact title because it's a pretty catchy title. Why you are more moral than Jehovah, something like that. Let me find it. You have better morals than Jehovah. Cedars vlog number 352. I haven't really been watching many exJW videos in general, and I don't watch the JohnCedars channel much anymore just because I got what I needed from that channel. I especially like his documentary on the UN and his very succinctly researched and very well presented video on the 607-1914 fallacy of Jehovah's Witnesses. Those are, I would say, my two favorite videos. And I respect his activism work. I totally disagree with him when it comes to belief in God, but I fully support him in his right to speak his views. If there's anything you want to know about me, it is that I am super anti-censorship. Once you get into censoring and silencing people, you are on a slippery slope of tyranny. Why are old videos of, insert name of dictator, Hitler, Stalin, whoever, why don't we just erase that from the history books? They were promoting hate because we learn from it so that we don't repeat it. So even people who say, Lloyd Evans, he thinks David Icke is inciting people to kill. I don't really get where that view comes from, because the little bit I've seen of David Icke, I watched his interview on Brian Rose on London Real TV. It was called Rose Icke 3 live stream. And literally the last 30 minutes of the interview, Icke is talking about how the cure to everything is to love one another. My point is I don't believe in censorship. So any atheist or someone who is not of the Christian persuasion that I identify with, who says that I'm trying to censor, you are very mistaken. So my friend sends me this video, and it had a very provocative title, so I watched it. And my initial reaction was one of what I would imagine how Peter felt when they arrested Jesus. Peter just got out his sword and sliced off the officer's ear because he loved his Lord. And I just wanted to use my words to fight and defend the God of the Bible. But I didn't. I'm like, I knew I was coming from a place of emotion. And whenever you do that, you should always pause. I'm learning that finally. Pause if you are speaking from a place of emotion. It's hard to do, and I fail regularly. Just ask me about how I feel about masks. And I left a little comment under his video expressing that I appreciate his work and I will continue to pray for him. I pray for all the Lloyd Evans because he's helped a lot of people leave a cult, and that is good work. And ultimately, we all have to take full responsibility for where we end up choosing to build our new homes. The Bible is interesting. It says, who's the wise person? The one who builds his house on sand or the one who builds himself on the rock being Jesus. And sometimes I feel like a total fraud, because there are literally days where my faith is microscopic. It's the size of a coronavirus. No, seriously, sometimes I honestly feel like I'm agnostic. I have never, I don't think, gone completely over into the land of atheism, because when I'm outside and in nature, I just cannot deny the wisdom and the intelligence that I see in everything. But there are days where I ask these same questions Lloyd asks in his video. How could a God of love do this? And then I'll go back to the account and I'll read it and I'll still be like, God, I don't understand. But I do believe that the key to reading the Bible is first knowing Jesus. And that is where, if you were raised for any length of time in the Jehovah's Witness groupthink, we were really disadvantaged, because while we were taught that Jesus died for our sins and he was the greatest man who ever lived, we absolutely were not taught about who he really is. And when you come to know Jesus, then you go back and read these scriptures that are troubling. I don't know if I'm even making sense. I always tell myself, Allie, write an outline so that you're not wasting people's time when you make a video. I'm sorry. This is just free flowing. But when I rethought about Lloyd's video, which I also wrote in the comment section, that I appreciate videos like that because it forces, or it calls the believer, those who profess faith in Jesus, it calls us to really defend our faith. We cannot just be these feel-good Christians who, that's not enough anymore. There's a reason why atheism is gaining traction. It's because we're not doing our job, so to speak, in defending the faith. We've become soft. Not that we go around debating so that we look smart, but rather so that we can plant seeds so that people can experience grace and be saved. So people who present these very challenging arguments remind me of Jacob. I immediately thought, like, well, this is really good that he's doing this, that Lloyd is asking these hard questions, like, what do you think of a God who kills or who allows a baby to die because its parents, David and Bathsheba, had an adulterous affair? These are the questions where we wrestle with God. And that reminds me of Jacob. And it's interesting, I don't even remember what the Watchtower theology is on like who Jacob actually was wrestling with. I think the Watchtower says he was wrestling with an angel, but that would, in context, that doesn't make sense. Genesis 32, starting in verse 22 to 32. That night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Then the man asked, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip. Fun fact. Because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." Wrestling with God. William Lane Craig. I have not listened to much of his work, but I hear that he is an excellent resource for tackling these deep questions that atheists pose. My husband's home. Hi, I'm making a video.
I'm going to cut that side branch thing.
Okay.
Now. That's rough.
Thank you.
You still talking?
Yeah, do you want to say hi?
I'm all sweaty.
He just came from the gym. But one of the things I mentioned in this video is how I appreciate the illustration you gave of how, even though you're a man, you could never understand the pain a woman goes through.
Hello.
And what would you like to say? Because I feel like you're better at speaking for people who've been victims of racial discrimination.
That's what the video's about?
No, it's about a lot of stuff. You know me, I ramble.
Basically, in the United States, if you're not white, not everyone, but there is a belief that you have less rights. Or people may not say it, but there is a belief, like if you're white, you're from this country, even though white people are from Europe, and the rest are something else. Like, starting with the word Americans, America's not a country. I mean, it was named after Amerigo Vespucci almost 270 years before there was even a country named United States of America in 1776. So, look at what they did to the Native Americans. Annihilated everywhere, from Canada all the way down to Chile. There's one thing I don't agree with, and I told this to, my black friends. I don't agree with the crime situation. I think people would listen more if that wasn't, I know crime comes with poverty. But I think in that respect, they can do that. And I can say that because the first actual black slave were brought to what is now the Dominican Republic in 1501, 1502. They were not brought to the United States. It's a really hard situation. I don't think looting is the answer. I don't think, breaking and, hitting people just walking because they don't agree with what you're doing. With that said, if a person commits a crime, they should get the same jail sentence or whatever sentence. It doesn't have to be because you have a better lawyer, you can afford a better lawyer. You get, blacks are more likely to get the death penalty underage, to go to jail, to get stopped, to get all kinds of things that other people don't have to deal with that in this country. Like I was telling Ali yesterday, when I was 13 years old, I got questioned by the FBI while board a plane. I was 13 years old. There was a bunch of other white teenagers walking around, and I was the one questioned. But my dad, we were taking a trip with the whole family, and my dad came back and showed the passport and everything. But I was being questioned and no one else. So this is something that people may understand, and of course, not all white people or not everyone is racist. There's racist in all, there's black people that are racist too. but it's not. I don't think people can understand because they never been to. I mean, the wealth has been passed from white generations through generations. I mean, first it was stolen from the Native Americans, and then it just kept passing on. Well, these individuals were slaves. They didn't have anything. They were thrown, out with nothing, and then they continued to tramp under civil rights. So 1865, that was just a law to liberate the slave. It wasn't that it just magically they were free. And look what happened in 1921, Black Wall Street, how they murdered 300 people, including the government. It was a mob of whites, and the government bombed the whole place. The prosperous black community, and it has never been the same. But I have to go. I can talk forever, but I have to go and do stuff.
All right. Thank you.
Ciao.
I think that illustrates that man dominates man to his injury. So we're in yet another cycle of Babylon. I'm going to put a link below to a really great sermon that I listened to yesterday on a walk about not having end times anxiety. And the favorite thing he said in this video was, if you have intentionally taken the mark of the Lamb, then you don't have to worry about accidentally taking the mark of the beast. And if that was thought-provoking to you, please listen to the sermon. It's a 3-part sermon, but I'll put part 3 below because that's where that quote comes from. Because other topic with this whole COVID conversation, even I was like, well, what if a vaccine is like the mark of the beast? I entertained that thought for a moment, but I'm like, God's not going to kill people if they take a vaccine. So these are just some of the things I have been thinking about and researching and listening to over the last month since I last said hello. And in the meantime, we're all experiencing a lot of trauma. So at the very least, let us practice kindness. And as Jesus said, love your God and love your neighbor as yourself. I do not do that perfectly any day by any means, every day by any means. But thanks to the grace of God, his mercies are new every day. And I will continue to pray for all of my fellow humans who are wrestling with God. I love you all. Shalom.